Fiona, you're muted.
Our speaker tonight is Emily Choga-Karama, who is an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy, Religion and Ethics at Moi University, Eldoret, Kenya. She has a PhD in Christian ethics from Fuller Theological Seminary. Amongst her many activities, she is co-founder of the African Christian Initiation Program, ACIP, a body that helps young people to transition from childhood to adulthood without falling into the ravages of HIV, AIDS, drug abuse, and peer pressure. This year, she has been awarded the Templeton World Charity Foundation Visiting Fellowship for 2021, and she will be visiting St. Anthony's College in Trinity term. Emily, I would like to pass the microphone over to you. If you let me know when you need the slides moved on to the next one, that would be great. Emily, are you able to hear us? Excuse me.
I know she had a problem with the connection last week, didn't she? So it might be that she kind of keeps coming in and out.
Yes, well, but her picture seems to have frozen. Let me just send her an email. Actually, Luana, could you give me a hand with this, please?
Good. Sorry, Fiona.
Great. We can hear you
maybe
now.
Okay. I'm sorry for the connection, which is not very stable. And in case it goes off again, I will. I'm trying to get an alternative to do that. Okay. Alternative connection. Are you okay? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So okay, so maybe I could switch off the video now, because then it will be less heavier, okay? For the bandwidth.
That would be great.
Is that okay with you? So that I can talk.
But if you let me know when you need the next slide, then I can assist you that way.
Oh. Yeah, because I'll be seeing at least the screen. Okay.
Fiona, can you screen share whenever Emily wants? It's not showing now.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Niko na credit already. Naona hii. Mwambie Tanua anisevia hiyo number. Okay. Let me talk now. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name. Okay, so my name is Emily Choga-Karama, and I'm going to present this lecture on personhood and society, the making of a Kenyan man and woman, a comparative study. As you've heard, I'm from Moi University in Eldoret, Kenya. That is our logo at the top. It's a university that was founded in 1984 as the second university in Kenya. So I've been working in the Department of Philosophy, Religion, and Theology since 1990. And so what I'll present today is part of the findings that we received from our project that was funded by Templeton World Charity Foundation Incorporated. That was from 2016 to 2017. And I'll share about our program that we've had. So thank you very much. And I'd like to start now. You can move the slide to the next. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'd like to begin by showing that in traditional African societies, we understood personhood not just as being born into life, but being born into a community. And so communalism is a very strong element in African communities. One of our philosophers, one of our founding philosophers from Kenya, John Beatty, said this phrase: "I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am." And there's also a common saying in Kiswahili which says, "Mtu ni watu," meaning a person, to be known as a person, or to get that identity as a human being, then you belong. You have to belong to a community, you have to belong to people. So this identity and belonging is to more than 42 ethnic groups in this country. That is, we have that number of people or people groups. So you belong to one of the ethnic groups, and maybe sometimes because of cross-cultural marriages, you can belong to one or two of them. And in order to belong, one had to go through various rites of passage from birth to death, where one was trained to belong to the community. Through these rites, one was initiated to belong and taught and also formed and socialized into the values of the community. The most rigorous rite was the one from childhood to adulthood, in which education to belong to the community was climaxed. In most of the communities in Kenya, in order to transition in this period, which was the period of adolescence, one had to go through circumcision for boys, and not just circumcision, but there were also there was rigorous education and formation into the values of the community. And for the girls in some communities, not all the communities, they had female circumcision as well. And so it was not just the physical rite of cutting, but also there was accompanying education and formation into to be a member of the community. So, so one had to go through these rites in order to belong or to be accepted and to have an identity as a member of each of these communities. Without going through the community rights, one could not per se be said to be a person in that community. And this is the one that really then brought in somebody, a person into the community. And so with all these communities, the 42 and maybe more in Kenya, which, Kenya became a colony of the British in earlier, maybe it was colonized earlier, but formally in 1920. So all these communities or ethnic groups were independent. They had their own rites of passage. their own communal rituals, their own ways of bringing a member into the community. So all these communities had their own. So in this work, we are trying to show how have these communities then come together to form one nation, or what is it that brings these people together as a Kenyan, because that the entity called Kenya did not exist before 1920. Next slide. Next slide, please.
It's
Fiona?
up. It's up.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
I don't know why. Okay, so I'll go to the next one. That with the entry of colonialism, there was now a confusion of how to belong, okay? And it was very difficult, you know, for these communities now, because now the colonial system came in and people needed to, yeah, okay, thank you. So anyway, these writings are to show that a personhood is understood in community. This is from West Africa, just a quotation. A scholar, Wiredu, is of the opinion that African traditional morality is essentially social. When writing about the ideal person according to the Akan of Ghana, he says the following: the communalistic orientation means that an individual's image will depend rather crucially upon the extent to which his or her actions benefit others rather than himself or herself. Not, of course, by coincidence, but by design. An individual who remained content with self-regarding success would be viewed as so circumscribed in outlook and not merit the title of being called a person. Yeah, so that is in the, just to emphasize again that a person is understood in community and in relationship with others. Okay, you can move to the next slide. That's also another quotation. Okay. Okay, another quotation from a scholar from Nigeria. In traditional Africa, according to Turaki, one is expected to carry responsibility in accordance with the wishes of the ancestors and the community of blood relations. One does not live in terms of objective principles. Similarly, one is not accountable to oneself, but to one's ancestors and the blood relations. Patriotism and loyalty to the state or a church therefore becomes a problem. Okay, so this then emphasizes that sense of belonging into community, which I've mentioned that in order for one to belong, you had to go through rites and and education and socialization in order to belong. So the next slide then, please. Okay. So with colonialism then, the advent of colonialism, there was the abandonment of traditional informal education, or it became known as informal education, which gave people the sense of personhood and belonging. This author said, today, the African society seems to be in a state of near chaos in the realm of morality because of that abandonment. There was an active assault of parallel systems of informal education, since they were seen as a threat to the new colonial systems. For example, among my people known as the Nandi, there was a system known as the age grade system, which came after the initiation into adulthood, after the male circumcision. And this was for the young men who would be maybe 20 years old. They would stay as like the Morans of the community, the young men, the warriors of the community, who would defend the community for about 15 years before marriage. So that age grade system was very rigorous and very military-like. So the British, because they saw that this would be a very a big threat to the new government, they demolished it in the 1920s. And so that the community has retained the initiation into adulthood without that bit of formation that young men had to serve the community for a period of about 15 years, where they are serving the work and the protect and the generally protectors of the community. So that stage of their lives was taken away, and now they had to they've gone into idleness and some into alcoholism because of that, because that bit was removed for the young men. So then, of course, as an alternative, there was introduction of formal education, or the modern type of education, by the missionaries. Actually, the colonial government was very reluctant and actually did not want to introduce education. So it is the missionaries who introduced formal education. And the missionaries, of course, were aimed at evangelization, and also there was a character component in the system of education that was introduced by the missionaries. And this was later the colonial government reluctantly entered into the system by giving education that would be focused on giving low-level skills to the Africans, so that they would be able to enter into the colonial system and be laborers and manual workers. So they did not like the system that was being given by the missionaries, which was really an academic type of education. The missionaries also formed or started boarding schools, which came after the pattern of grammar schools, which were from England, and yeah, they brought them into the systems, into Kenyan system. And that kind of boarding school system, which is still a system of education in Kenya, was meant actually to take the children away, to form them and to make them into people who are part of who have been evangelized and who are converted, and also who would be the ones who would carry on the work of the missionaries once they left. Yeah, so that system was formed, and it became a part of our system in Kenya. So what we can commend the missionaries is that they actually gave education, and they were very passionate in letting Africans receive academic form of education. But what we could, the downside of it is that they did not try to understand the system of education that was holistic, that was to form the whole person in the community and belong to the African community. So they did not understand what both the colonial government as well as the missionaries. And many times, of course, the Africans did not understand the difference between the missionary and the white person. I mean, the colonial. So in fact, there is saying that there is no difference between the settler and the missionary. In some communities, they have a saying like that. So it was difficult, although the missionary was for the Africans and really stood for the interests of the Africans most times against the colonial government. The Africans did not understand. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so the effect was to alienate the African from their roots and from their system. All the rites of passage were condemned, and they were put away as not serving the gospel. So they did not understand how would these systems that were in the past, how they would be work for the gospel. So they did not do any inculturation or any understanding of the gospel in culture. So that is what we would say about the missionary education. So the effect was that the young people were neither belonging to, they were not Christians fully because they were not well established in the values of the gospel, and they were not also fully African because they had been alienated from their roots. Yeah. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Fiona, the next slide.
Stop, Emily.
Okay. Okay. So then when the independence came, Kenyans had to refocus in the academic, to refocus to academic education. The education that had been given by the missionaries was seen as good, and it prepared them for what the white collar jobs that had been left by the colonial government. And most of those actually who became leaders in governments, in the Kenyan government, were graduates of these missionary schools. So the system now that the government adopted was characterized by rigorous examination system that sieved people according to their academic achievements. The skills and the vocational training that had been added by the colonial government was seen as inferior. And so that was not focused on. So what the government really was focusing on was these high-level academic achievements. So we had the first were Cambridge certificates, then the East African certificates, then the Kenya certificates of education. All these had tiers and levels where one had to stop and acquire a certificate before you go into the next level. And then we have finally the 844 system, which is being phased out by now into the competency-based education, because of what has happened since it was not, I mean, this education system became very academic, exam-oriented, achievement in form of exams, and not character. Not character development. So we had such massive cheating, massive acquisition, and trying to get to compete according to schools competing because there was ranking of schools according to achievements of in the O-level exams, in the A-level exams. Later the A-levels were phased out, but O-levels were still there. And so schools would compete, and students had to go to schools according to how they performed, not because of the character. Although there was still character teaching, or but it was not being tested in any way or assessed, and so that was very difficult. So the next slide, please. So the effect of this was graduates with high academic achievements, but not much on character values. So I started teaching at the university, as I said, in 1990. And with my colleagues, we noticed that the students who came to the university at that time were least prepared to face, the sudden freedom that the university gave them, because they had not been given the skills to navigate and make choices, the right choices in their lives with regard to the freedom. So they would come in because they had been in very tightly monitored high schools, boarding schools, but no, because they had not been skilled enough on their values. Within a short time, they faced issues of alcoholism. They fell into drug abuse, pregnancies, abortions, and all that. So that they were characterized. I mean, those things characterized the life of the students, and it was very difficult. So we had to talk to students. We started talking to the students as ladies. So there was the history of our program started in the early 90s with these students that we noticed who came to the university looking, innocent and good. But then within a short period, all these things, wrong choices had been made, and their lives were at a risk. And so we started this African Christian initiation program to try and rebuild the traditional education that was there, which was formation of character, values, and also marry it with modern education with the proper life skills and training to achieve honestly through the maybe the exam system, but still have values and be responsible members of the community. So when we started by inviting, first of all, we saw it was with the girls, because we were girls, our founder members are girls. So we started as girls first, ladies to ladies talk. And then the boys started asking, we need also to come, we need to receive this information that you are teaching to the young people, I mean to our colleagues, the girls. And so we included the boys, and hence now we had to start the program, African Christian Initiation Program. So I'll continue. The next slide. Yes. I'm giving you a little of what happened in the effects, just to tell you what was happening. This is a quote that I took from our report of what during the evaluation of this program. Within the second half of 2016, more than 120 schools throughout Kenya experienced fires following a government crackdown on cheating in national examinations. There were no fatalities in these fires, clearly suggesting that arson attacks, though the motive of the attacks had not been established to date. In the year 2017, a spate of arson attacks, though not as expensive, was experienced in also various parts of the country. They were easily ignored because they were minor cases and far apart until the arson attack at Moi Girls Nairobi, another school of repute, in 2017. 9 girls died in the fire and scores were injured. Following this incident, we submitted an article to the Daily Nation in mid-September 2017, in which we expressed our diagnosis of the social situation in Kenya, that parents have emotionally neglected their children. Yeah, as a result of the boarding system and the desire for parents to see their children achieve in the next, achieve more than them, most of them sent them off to boarding schools and did not, at an early age, sometimes in primary school or an early, very young age of maybe 6 years, and were alienated from their parents. And then others, mostly in high school, when they are 14 years old, most of them leave their parents. So we were concerned about this. Yeah, so this is one of those effects as well. And then the cheating and all that was going on in the schools. All right. Next, please. Next slide. I'll continue to the next slide, which is actually talking about the African Christian Initiation Program. So we also have renamed it African Character Initiation Program. So we began in 2004 to help to transition these young people, which we saw was where the African system of education had been very strong in, from childhood to adulthood, following the traditional systems, where boys were circumcised and taught the virtues of belonging to the community, and one of the values and virtues that were transmitted or brought to the core of the teaching was courage to face life, courage to face difficult situations, and courage also to work and walk together with others. So this new program that now we began was more multi-ethnic, unlike the traditional rites that had been focused on one community, because we lived in an urban center, and so it was meant to prepare these young people to the new community that is now called Kenya. We found out, that we could not continue just the way we had been initially doing as African different communities. So boys and girls were then to be included in the curriculum. With traditional circumcision or traditional initiation rites would separate boys and girls, but in the program that we began, we decided that they would be together. Boys would be circumcised, and there would be a doctor who would come, and this would happen around the age of 11, between 11, at least those who entered 11, 12, 13, when they are finishing primary school and ready to go into high school. And then they would stay for a week healing and being taught. Then the girls would stay for, would join the boys after a week, actually after 2 weeks, and be taught together in a classroom. We developed a curriculum that focused on life skills, choices, helping them appreciate the changes in their body systems, health, skills of saying no to peer pressure, peace building initiatives, and how to attain success in an honest manner. Yeah, so we trained them together, and which was a new thing. And there was also, at the end of the training, we would have a communal celebration, and we would have a community-based. So it was mainly community-based. We asked the parents to contribute towards this, and we did it in one of the schools during a school holiday. Most of our schools would close in December, and so we would have them in the December holiday before they go into the next class. Yeah, so we started to do this in 2004. And most of our colleagues who we began together had children who were in that age. And so we were wondering, how would these children learn those values if we cannot bring them together? The next slide, please. So we yeah, we continued to do this program for about 10 years. Yeah, for about 10 years until 2014. We produced a manual, training manual over this, known as My Life Starting Now. The program was taking place every year. We also produced a small book, pocket-friendly book known as ACIP Jewels. That book that could be carried everywhere by the young people, so that they could remember and put in practice the virtues that they had been taught in ACIP or in the program. Yeah. The next one slide, please. Yeah. So this is what was going on for those 10 years. So when we met Fiona and members of the Templeton, one of our colleagues met Fiona and talked about this program. And so we realized that we had not assessed, I mean, we wanted to know how will we continue? What has it done? And so we got the grant, and this was some of the questions that we needed to do in assessing the program. So the central aim of the assessment was to establish what character virtues has ACIP developed in adolescents that enabled them to become responsible adults. And to what meeting its aim, the following questions were to be answered. Has ACIP developed confidence, self-esteem through self-awareness in early adolescence? Has ACIP instilled the invisible realities of love, honesty, self-control, care, and respect among adolescents? Are these virtues manifested more significantly among ACIP alumni than among non-ACIP alumni? And what lessons can be learned from ACIP? Yeah, so those are the main questions that we asked, or we put forward in order to assess the program. Continue. Next slide, please. Yes. So in assessing the program, we adopted a method of assessment, a multi-method approach. We did a literature review to find out what was in the literature about this initiation programs all over the world, and especially in Africa. We did also an alumni tracer for our alumni that had gone through the program over this period of time, and we found out actually we could trace about 269 of our alumni who had gone through the program. And we did a non-experimental comparative case study involving both qualitative and quantitative designs to compare the two, actually three groups: those who had gone through ACIP, those who had not gone through ACIP, had gone through a traditional rite, and those who had gone through a modern rite of passage. So we did that, and we also did, which I have not included in that design, we also did what a study. We went around 7 counties in Kenya to find out what was happening in the counties with regard to the different parts of Kenya with regard to traditional rites of passage. Were they abandoned? What was happening? And so that is what I'd really like to report about today. The next slide will show that what was happening in comparison, with what was happening in ACIP. Was there a concern for values? Was there a concern for character in our country? So that's the next slide that I would like us to see, that this was to contribute the study was to contribute towards the foundation of Vision Kenya 2020. Yeah. So we went around the counties, and these are some of the, we found out this 7 counties. Okay. There's the below and the slide which is down there is for Uasin Gishu, which is not showing, but this is what was happening. By the way, the spelling should be ethnic, not ethnic, but ethnic best, meaning traditional rights. In Kakamega, we saw 10. In Keyo Marakwet, so 2, which was church-based mainly, and an alternative rite of passage for girls. In Nandi, which is a neighboring county, we saw 4, which were church-based, 3 for boys, 1 for girls. In Nairobi, we saw 5, 1 for ethnic-based, 1 which was church-based, 2 which were church-based, which mix boys and girls, and then mentoring of girls in high school. Then we saw another one in Nakuru, which was church-based, and we also in Narok, which was ethnic based, and then circumcision for girls. So the circumcision was still going on actually for girls, although it has been outlawed actually by the government. It is against the law in Kenya, but they still feel that there is nothing that is being done. So there's another one down, but will not, the slide doesn't show. It's from Uasin Gishu. That is our home country. Our county here is where the university is situated. We have 12 of them. So we had 12 rites of passage that we observed, mainly church-based. A few that were ethnic, because this is a more of an urban area. Okay. The next, what were the other findings that we found out? So the next slide will show us then about the fact that although the African education system had been put on the back burner, the rites of passage was still going on, and people were still focusing on them. So here are some of the findings, that they were focusing on values. These rites were focusing on values, on virtues, which included courage, hospitality, generosity, responsibility, and love of neighbor and love of God. So they, one thing that we could mention about, we continue, is that they are community-based and they are also community-initiated. That shows still that sense of belonging in the community. It shows also the resilience of the communities, so we could see that there was resilience of the communities despite the modern challenges, the modern changes, the colonialism, and all those further factors that had made the changes come in. So they were going on, and then there was communal celebration and community participation. They build in the social element. They build in the social element by not doing this for individual children, but for a group of children, so that they would support one another throughout their lives. Those who go through this rite together form an age set, or a cohort that continue to check on one another and to support one another throughout their lives. Yeah, so this we saw as something very positive that was happening even in the communities, way down the line when all these other changes were going on. Next slide, please. So, yeah, so we are saying that although the system of education, the African system of education, had actually been interfered with, they were still going on. Okay, we saw certain limitations that were in these programs as well. There was no written curriculum, so it mainly depended on the oral tradition, meaning it would not be transferable to the next, either to the next community or to others. And it was meant also for individual communities. It meant they were doing it also. A different community would be having different variations of these rites. Some were basically traditional, or they still try to keep it as traditional as possible, or the way it was in the past. Others did it in hospital, and others had a blend of the two. So there was quite a lot of variation. The length of time also varied, where the children spent during the time they were also being trained was varied. There was also an element of cost and some commercialization in what was being offered. Some charged very high cost fees, especially those which were in the urban areas, like in Nairobi. Yeah. Then there was focus on one gender, meaning most of them focused on the boys, and the girls were neglected. Only in the communities that had female circumcision before, they were the ones that were conscious that girls also should get some training. They should get some life skills training. So those were the only communities that seemed to pay attention. But those that had not had, like the ones in Kakamega, they didn't have female circumcision, so they only focused on the boys. So that is one of the limitations, or some of the limitations that we observed during this comparative study of the various initiation rites. The next slide, please. So we also saw the positive things still, alongside the formal education curriculum that was being given in high school or in primary school. The Kenyan communities or ethnic communities had not abandoned aspects of the traditional education that focused on character. And in all the countries, there were various community rights that were meant to help the young people to transition into adulthood. The reason they carried on these programs was to help young people to gain some values such as courage, respect, and concern for one another, as we've said. There was a fear that if they did not do this, the young people would lose their morals. So there was a concern in all these 7 counties that we looked at. Next, please. So culminate in the time to bring people together, we organized national workshop in 2017, where we brought together 100 practitioners of initiation from all the counties that we had gone to. I also included government officials and society groups, so that we could go together about the lack of character who made the need community, and all these rights to our some and some were just community based. So it was a 3-day watch that we brought. It was a very engaging watch. The program. Yes. The looking forward. They suggested the recommendations was that we should have a function like that every year, so that we see how we can towards values. And they read that the African Education Program that had the tools programs count as well. Yeah, so that's recommendations that we had. It was very positive. We had parents, we had alumni of ACIP that had gone through the program, and it was a very engaging workshop. So this is just a snippet of what went on. It was a very engaging workshop for 3 days, and even the government officials were very what was happening, and showed that we need character values to be instilled into the curriculum as well. Next, I think we are almost about the end. Next slide. We are almost at the end. So yeah, so it was very good. Yeah, we in comparison, when we went through the rites of passage, and in comparison with the others, we saw 2 programs that are offering for boys and girls to go through or ACIP, and another program that was happening in Nairobi, which is called the ROPES program. There are only 2 that brought together boys and girls to go through, and the young people appreciated the fact that they could go through this together and learn together. Narratives that showed that they really respected one another because of going through these rites together. They also, we realized some of the positive elements of ACIP was, and this other program was, they are multicultural audience, or they are reaching a multicultural audience, and they are towards the building of a new Kenya that is focused on values, meaning bringing together a cohesion, and yet also recognizing the individual differences that each of the communities had. During the program at the National Initiation Rights Workshop, they agreed actually that the values that should characterize a new Kenya, and by extension a new Kenyan man or woman, should be, they mentioned these ones and they put together. They said integrity is one of the things that we should focus on, recognition of cultural diversity, and of course I've told you about the various cultures that make up Kenya, patriotism, that sense of belonging now into the Kenyan bigger community, peace as one of the other values, good leadership, stewardship of the resources that we have, love for one another, equity, and cohesion. Yeah, so those about 7 values were recognized as some of the very central values that should characterize a new Kenyan woman, man or woman. Okay, yeah. So this is about the end of the slides, but I have a concluding one. Yeah, so this came out during the workshop as we had this national initiation rights workshop. Okay, another one, please. The last slide. So the way forward then, what is the way forward in this? We said, according to proven fairness systems approach and the exploration of how education can aid in human flourishing, ACIP, the program that we talked about, ACIP falls into all those levels. Yeah, and especially as we've seen in the from the level of the family, the micro, the meso level, by not only assisting the parents. We remember the parents who are being accused of neglecting their children. We actually, within the ACIP program, which I did not mention, we also had a training aspect for parents, where we bring the parents of the young people who have come so that they can have some skills of parenting them as they go through initiation, as they go through the teenage period. And we also, the system helps children to acquire skills such as self-esteem and hard work and confidence, even to face uncertain times. Now, during this COVID season, we have developed, as a result of that assessment, we have various platforms where the alumni continue to meet, and one of them is WhatsApp. They have a WhatsApp group, and they also have a Facebook page where they communicate. I think we also have a Twitter handle, and the founders as well as these young people meet together. So we had during COVID, we were able to interact with one another, and they mobilized themselves to visit an informal settlement, which is not very far from where most of them live, so that they could hear the experiences of the young people in the community. They said this, as ACIP, we are not stopping. We want to see how we can help these young people in informal settlements to flourish where there is very little to go on. We would like to see ACIP's methodology help us to do so. And so, so that's what these young people did. And now they have a monthly program where they intervene to provide sanitary towels for the girls, and so also organize. Before the schools were opened, they wanted to organize football teams for the young men in the community as well, and athletics, because our town is an athletic town. So we are hoping that we could conduct now then, because as if we had not done a baseline survey when we started our program, we would like to do one now, which we could conduct a longitudinal study and see how we could intervene to bring flourishing in the lives of young people, especially in informal settlements. So and so this is the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for listening, and I'm sorry for all the inconveniences because of our poor network here. So thank you so much. I think this the last slide, which shows the acknowledgements to this ACIP research team, which is I acknowledge, and then for our various pictures. One of the trainings in the last 2019, that's when we did our last. We didn't do one last year, and the other one shows celebrations of cultural night during the workshop, or the initiation workshop, the national initiation workshop that we had in Nairobi. I think there are two more pictures where they participated. The members participated in very engaging and colorful celebrations during that workshop. Those are still some of them. We were hoping we could get one for Fiona. She was a member in that time, but I didn't catch a picture of hers. But that was one of our members too who attended, Professor Briggs. He was dressing in a costume that befits his culture, where he comes from, and these are other members of our group as well. So thank you so much, colleagues, and for listening and hearing about our program. So this is just an initial presentation, just to give us what it is that we've done. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Emily, for a terrific presentation. I'm rather relieved that there aren't any photographs of me, actually.
Yes, thank you.
Really lovely to see.
I am super relieved.
I would like to pass the mic over to my colleague David Johnson for some initial thoughts before I open the floor for questions.
Okay.
Fiona, do you think you can stop sharing the screen? Or is it just,
okay, well,
just
I'll do
on my screen?
Okay, I'll try and work out how to do that. But if can, meanwhile, I thought I'd done it, but I will try and do that. Well, if you could make your comments, I'll fiddle around.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks very much, Emily. Thanks so much for your presentation. That is really fantastic. It's good to hear what you're doing. It's also good to hear of some of the history, I suppose, that that precedes the your program. I just wanted myself to. I'm just trying to work out. Oh, here we are. It's a bit disorientating when there's so much on the screen, but I was very interested in the history, and particularly where you started with missionary education and so on. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask about in Kenya, because Kenya was really very important in giving shape to how colonial education in Africa proceeded. And so, obviously, just for the benefit of the students on the call, but one significant element was the visit to East Africa in 1924 of the Phelps-Stokes Commission. And
yes.
the aim of this mission was, and I quote because I years ago I used to teach a little bit on education in Africa, was to find the types of education best fitted to meet the twofold needs of Negro masses and of Negro leaders of Africa. All right, this is directly from the Phelps-Stokes in the near future, he said. And the commission sought to apply theories of Negro education developed at Hampton and Tuskegee institutions in the United States. Now, what is interesting about the Phelps-Stokes Commission, I was just actually, as you were talking, finding some of my slides, was the theory stressed the idea that, and this is interesting, quote from them, education must be vitally related to the needs of the people, and wait for it, with character training as decidedly the most important educational objective. Now, that was an interesting, very interesting find from the Phelps-Stokes Commission. And what then happened was it was thought that in this context, it was the origin of a very important thing for Kenya, was the origin of the Jeans schools. I don't think you've come across the Jeans schools, but as a result of the visit of the Phelps-Stokes Commission, there was Miss Emma Jeans, who was a Quaker in Philadelphia, and she gave George, Dr. Frizzle, really, who was commended by George Peabody, who was the treasurer of the General Education Board. So, you know, today we have the Peabody Institute. And she gave Dr. Frizzle a check of $10,000 US, which was quite a lot of money. And this allowed graduates from Hampton to come out to the field in Kenya. And again, as the paper puts it, to arouse the Negroes, right? And state the importance of the educational needs of their communities. And through their work, school terms were lengthened, schoolhouses were improved, new interests were created in the education of the so-called Negro children. But what was important here again, was the recommendations of the Phelps-Stokes Commission, the study of education in West Africa, the type of work done by the Jeans visiting teachers from the US, was stressed as a good way to develop rural African education along what they call proper lines. And the report emphasized community development, community enrichment, agricultural training, active relationships between homes and schools. And sort of finally, in the final slide, equally important is the government's provision of training and so on, so that out of school, so that they became centers of influence for the improvement of the masses of native people in the areas of health, agriculture, village crafts, home, and the final word, character. So it's very interesting. So forgive all the references to Negroes and native and so on and so on. But I was actually just working from some of these horrifically penned texts from these documents. But the question is, side by side with this sort of historical picture of the Phelps-Stokes Commission, the Jeans schools, the missionaries who weren't very happy with the idea that there was another commission led by a member of the House of Lords in Britain, who also spoke of two-tiered education for Kenyan people, one that, as you were saying, trained them to take hold of the administration, and the other was really to train them to be able to obey commands and so on. And, the missionaries kicked up against that, but they didn't have funds. They depended on the British, on the Crown, really, to continue with education. So I just wondered, Emily, in the context of this and sort of side by side with this sort of historical perspective, I was looking interestingly at Kenya's Vision 2030 for education. And Kenya has been very ambitious. And when one compares Kenya's sort of scholastic results to other African countries, Nigeria, Madagascar, Burundi, Rwanda, and so on. I mean, Kenya does it extremely well comparatively, certainly in compared to other countries in Africa. But looking at the 2030 vision astounded me a little bit, because just a few weeks ago I was looking at Tanzania's vision, And in most of the African countries, the vision is very much development of the African man and woman, the idea of as it was in your first slides, that the South African concept of Ubuntu, or, you are because we are, and so on. And that runs through a lot of the vision statements in other African governments. But I was quite struck by the fact that it no longer appears in the Kenyan Vision 2030, unless I've missed it. And there does seem to be this drive to create a sort of, that Kenya is ambitious and prosperous and wants to be globally competitive, economically so, and otherwise. So these are three bits of the puzzle that I wanted to just to raise with you, and to ask the question whether you think, obviously not recommending that we take the Phelps-Stokes Commission seriously, but just what you thought of that historical period in Kenya, and the stress actually on character development. And is that very different? And I suspect your answer would be yes, it is, to what we understand to be character in the sort of African way, as your paper was saying. And the second question really is there any room for the development of virtue and character in Kenya if one looks at Kenya's Vision 2030, which just seems to completely ignore it in, in favor of global competitiveness and so on. But you would know much, much better than I do. So those were just some opening remarks, Emily. And with that, I thank you so much for your presentation again.
Emily, you're on mute. Emily, you're on mute. Thank you.
Okay. I have unmuted now. So thank you, Dr. Johnson, for those remarks, yeah, and the education of the Negroes as they appear at the First Talks Committee. That is very interesting. I need to go and read it again. And thanks so much for yeah, in my history of education, we did that. As you say, that importance of character was a good emphasis that that need even. Actually, it was seen in those in 1924, and was that emphasis. And I had not seen that. I had not seen the link with the gene schools, as you said, the ones of that were bakers. And one of the schools that that was established and has been known as one of the national schools actually up to now is called Friends School Kamusinga. Friends School Kamusinga was owned by Quakers. They that has been known for them is their character and their values of the that. And one of the things that I've heard about that school is that they only have one rule for the students. Other students, other schools, so many rules that the students are supposed to keep. One rule: use common sense. And it seems one of this won't be very think in character, values, and think most recently there has been such and there's so much. One of our grandchildren actually went to started going to school, to the high school most recently. He's supposed to be in Form 3 now, but because of the so many of us going into these schools, it has almost been very difficult to even have that the people, the children who go to school, they almost have been the struggle with offering the academic education that also incorporates character, values to every and be able to attract people to school. And it's because now in national school, so the numbers are like, over 2,000 students in school. So that's struggle. Even those all those national schools have been actually by education of virtue, or the emphasis on and also good performance. But I think what is working against is the numbers that we are having in our system right now, especially since we have what we call 100%
Excuse me, Emily. Excuse me,
yeah?
Emily. the reception this end is very bad. So could I ask you to turn your video off? And that might help with the quality of the sound.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We're really interested in what you say. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was saying that character, emphasis on character, and as I say, that was carried on in the missionary schools and the private schools. There has been, but those schools now also, because of their emphasis on character, they got a good reputation and were elevated into the status of an national, meaning that they were then receive students from all over the country, all over, from the whole nation. And so now what they are struggling with is the numbers. How they can cope with the numbers, especially with what we call 100% inclusion. So we into high school since I think since 2000, when I'm not sure which year is when the government has worked on making sure that students are not cut off the transition, but the best students go into the national schools, and so they are really struggling with their the numbers. And then I would like to respond there. So thank you for the very insightful observations, and that is very helpful for me to enter, put in that character thing, that it was seen even much earlier by this commission of 1924. Then the emphasis too was on the skills that the government wanted to impart. So agriculture, vocational training, and skills that would really meet the needs of the community. So that was also that brought in, and the missionaries, of course, did not appreciate that, but they had to include it as part of their curriculum so that they would be, of course, be accredited by the commissions. So that we can see, but most times what the mission, what the Africans saw was like an hypocrisy, that there was a training that was being given to the white children and to maybe the Asians, and then with the Africans they were being given again what seemed to have been low quality education, and so there was a resistance from that time. So there's been a negative attitude towards vocational training, because it seemed to prepare just for servitude and for manual tasks. So the system of education then suffered, although there've been polytechnics and technical schools. That initial part where it seemed like education was only, that part of education was only being given to the Africans, brought in negative attitude. So that now it's when the government is really working very hard to introduce or to give technical training, and they are giving subsidies to students to go into the polytechnics and vocational training. Any of those who do not go into high school or have come out of high school and need a training, they are being subsidized by the government. So it's at least coming back. That attitude, that negative attitude, is kind of going down. It's being erased. So yeah, so I think that may have the different types of education may have brought in that negative attitude. That is whether there is a whether there is a chance. Actually, I had another slide that I showed in our in greeting the vision, which is the Vision 2030 House of Kenya. So in this House of Kenya, there are pillars: the pillar, social pillar, the political pillar, and the pillar. Under that, the pillars, the foundation is supposed to be a values pillar. But then, unlike all these other pillars where they've given clear-cut clear direction and guidance on how to be put in place, it's no teaching or it's no guidance, and there is no direction about how that moral part. That is what we asked if we are thinking. Can we inject something and say, you cannot ignore? I mean, they put in the moral, and I think it's actually much later when people resisted and said, how can we have a house with a foundation of values? So there is now that the house, they get a new of Vision 2030 with values underneath, but still there's no clear-cut direction, and that is a niche maybe that we can launch in as people work about character, that we can say, without this, the house will not be able to stand. Mm-hmm.
That's terrific, Emily. Thank you very much. And just to remind you, if you could turn off your video, I think we might be able to hear you better on this end. There are lots of questions in the chat, also a number of hands up. So I'd like to pass the mic to Luke Swan and then to Jonathan Beale before picking up some of the questions that other people have asked.
Yes.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for that, Emily. That was a really insightful account of education, culture, and history in Kenya. One of the things that I found really interesting was the rites of passage. These initiations are very formative experiences that people have taken to mark that transition from childhood to adulthood, or at some other significant point in life. Some of the problems that I see, especially in this country, is that the period of adolescence between childhood and adulthood has increased. And in this country, there aren't as many of those initiations where people can develop that character in an experiential way and take those steps. So given some of these problems and given what you've learned, do you have any suggestions for how we can create more of these ceremonies or rituals or experiences to mark these transitions into adulthood or to a new part of life for young people?
Okay. Can I respond now? Let me respond then. Thank you very much for that. That's insightful. Are you still here? Are you getting me still?
We can't hear you very well. Can you maybe turn off your camera, and then we can.
I don't have it on now.
Okay.
It's off. Yes,
Okay.
it is off. Yeah, it is off.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll try now.
Okay, so I was saying, yes, that these rites and initiations, we found out in the literature, children or young rituals and rites a chance of flourishing and living better, coming up, able to adapt to the world or adjust to the situations that they are in a much better way. So that the literature can support that all over the world, not just from Kenya, but there is lots going on in the US about the initiations. Meaning it's not accompanied by the the physical part of transition, but there should be at least an initiation that they can go through. And so I could suggest some literature that we can, I can give, so that we can see how we can as part of could do that. You know, when there's a cohort of young people, you know, because human beings are social beings. Okay, and if they have a relationship that they can continue and can also go through some experiences together, some things that could be incorporated, you know, some boot camp or some sort, some physical thing that they go together that will unite their hearts together. Share some of the literature that can help in forming those kinds of initiations or those kinds of experiences, so that the young people can go through. Okay, yeah. So maybe I can have a talk communication later and share some of those literature. Yeah, okay. So do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Luke, for your question. Jonathan, question over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily, for such an interesting talk and for telling us all about the wonderful work you're doing. It's so interesting and so excellent to hear about. I'm fascinated by your character education program in particular. And my question is very simple. I just wondered if there's any particular character traits or dispositions or skills or virtues, whichever word you would like to use, that you've particularly focused on in your character education program. For example, resilience or empathy or determination or motivation or so
on. All right. Yeah, we have not focused on any specific character, but we have our values. So we did not test specific. There's a questionnaire or an instrument to use. It's called the PVQ. PVQ. We test our young people went through, and so because we did not have a big science to begin our program to test out. I mean, was being trained or what we were training on, but we emphasized courage, self-esteem, confidence, and okay. But we have not tested specific ones. Yeah. I think that's what an easy answer for now. We've not really tested, but we used these instruments to test. They were coming through alumni were coming or getting this value that the instrument was testing. They were coming top in that. Yet we had not tested at the beginning. At least even when we apply the instrument to them, in as opposed to the other, they come through superior in that. And yeah, so that's, but specific qualities we didn't really emphasize, and virtues.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to pick up a couple of questions from the chat and then pass the mic over to Cicely, Cicely Greaves, who's got some comments. So Johnson is asking if there's any quantitative data on outcomes for ACIP participants versus non-ACIP, or does that require a lot, an additional study? There is real concern from Kennedy about female genital mutilation. There's continually, practiced amongst Kenyan communities, despite the presence of a law against it. And what and asking what alternative rites of passage are available for girls. And Cecily, if you'd like to turn your mic on as well, we can ask these 3 questions together, and then give her time to respond to all of them.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we
Yeah, I
can.
can't remember. I'm in the middle. So this was very wonderful. It's very, very interesting, Emily. And my interest is that I'm actually going to be doing something similar to what you've done there. I'm going to be doing in Ghana. So your information is very, very useful in regards to the virtues. That's what I have a business called Regard for Virtues. So I use the virtues to teach individuals, not teach, but guide them into understanding the virtues and to live more from the virtues. So I would really like to get some more information in regards to what you've done. I think your information will be very useful. These children are children who have been trafficked for labor. And so we're going to create something for where they'll be living there and going to school and eating and everything in this. So we're going to start the project this month. So your information will be very, very useful. So I'd like to get the recording and also see how I can maybe talk to you some more, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. I'm thankful for the response, and I think Fiona has my contacts, and we can chat much. In detail about how we can collaborate in seeing how you can continue that training. Okay, so I think that's my response to that. So yeah, we've done some work even for children also who are in very resource children who are on the streets, and I can share some of the things that we did with them as well. We had to adjust some of the program to really fit their situation. And so I think our program is, anyway, you can always fit it to the context that you are in. All right, I'll respond to the other two questions. The questionnaire that we used that I mentioned earlier is called, the instrument was Portrait Values Questionnaire, PVQ, which is a standard questionnaire or which has quantitative data. So that we applied that questionnaire to ACIP alumni and their counterparts who are in the same situation with them when they were going through the program. They need to give us one who went through the traditional rite and another who went through the modern rite. And so we compared the two, and we have the ACIP. So we have some quantitative results with that. But as I said, one of our limitations is that we had not tested at the very beginning, but we were testing at the end. But at least even with this, we could still see a significant impartation and change or values that were in ACIP alumni as opposed to the non-ACIP alumni. I would have presented that today, but I didn't do that. So that we have as well. So I thought we can still converse on that as well. Now, another concern was on the female genital mutilation or female circumcision, actually. So the focus, and I think it's because of not understanding what the value is, or why is this being eradicated? Because for the community, it had a place. It had a place for teaching and for forming girls and putting values in girls. So when the missionaries fought against it, there was an uprising. People rebelled against that. So even now, when the government has fought against it, they still go underground. because of not really understanding what is it. The people fear, or the communities fear, that we have not instilled values. So even though, so they need to really change their attitudes, and rather than just condemning that and saying there are alternatives. So actually there are alternatives. They give alternative, right? We have done for our group. More recently, I went to a community, which I thought we were doing something on values also, and on identities. It's only just most recently that community have stopped female circumcision in maybe 5 or 10 years. Not even stopped; they are still going on, but they are beginning to realize that they do not need to circumcise girls. So I think it's the way it has been fought, or it has been condemned without understanding what the values were. So I think taking a new strategy of actually saying we appreciate, that this is the way you thought that values would be transmitted, but there is an alternative, and we are concerned that we can do it, and girls can still come out whole round and wholesome even without it. And in fact, there is dangers in doing the circumcision itself. Mm-hmm. So that's, for me, I think, is where we went wrong in not giving the reasons, or in not showing why this was not to be done. Yeah. So I think I've answered as much as I could those questions. Is there anything that I have yet not responded to?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who want to thank you for a really terrific and fascinating presentation. And there are a lot of people who want to get in touch. So I expect to be deluged by emails in the next few days asking for your contact details, which I will provide. So a big thank you to you and the team at Moy University for terrific project, a terrific presentation, which we've all really enjoyed, and for your patience in bearing with poor connectivity, which I know is a struggle that you have. But no, really looking forward to seeing you in Oxford next term, and your offerings, your vibrant offerings that you can teach us about kind of education in Kenya. So next week we have our final speaker, who is Dr. Jonathan Beale, who's been an active contributor to this series. Yes. He's based at Eton College, and his paper is going to be on what is the relationship between education's epistemic aims and its aims of supporting human flourishing. So we're very much looking forward to seeing you all this time next week. And thanks again, Emily, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you for all the input that I've received and learned from this. Thank you so much. I look forward to coming and interacting in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.